Jesus died and rose from the dead thousands of years ago, what's the point and what are the exact implications of the gospel in my life and in your life today? You see, so many Christians get stuck in a waiting mentality. Now that I'm saved, I wait. I wait to get to heaven, or I wait for Jesus to hopefully one day come back and right all the wrongs in the world. That Christian waiting mentality. But friends, the gospel is so much more than just a simple placeholder in heaven. In Revelation 21 verse 5, God makes this incredible statement where he says, I am making all things new. Now, I love this sentence, but I love this sentence for one very specific reason, and it's the tense that this sentence is written in. Now, if you would have noticed, this sentence is written in the present continuous tense. Now, why am I saying that? Why is that important? Well, simply because of this. What does the present continuous tense mean? It means that the action that's taking place is busy taking place right now. It is a continual action. It's happening at this very moment. You see, God is not only in the business of restoring and making things new one day when his son comes back to rule and reign on the earth and to establish his shalom wherever we go. He's not only in that business, but he is in the business of making things new right here, right now, in my life and in your life and in the spaces and places around us. That's the point of the gospel. Again, he says, I'm making all things new. I'm not making all new things. You see, there's a big difference. Making all things new and making all new things are two separate things. The one means I take what is currently here in the now, in the present, and I make that new, versus I annihilate and destroy everything else and then just start from scratch. But that is not God's agenda. His agenda is making us new right here, right now, and then by faith, extending that newness, extending that restoration plan of his into all the reaches of the earth, the cities and our neighbors and our schools and our businesses. That is God's agenda. Now for today, we want to take a quick look at John chapter 4. It's the story where Jesus meets a Samaritan woman at a well. And in this story, there are 3 key moments and 3 key shifts that happen in her life. And if you understand it correctly, then in the life of every believer. Firstly, we'll discover in this story how the gospel gives me faith for myself. Secondly, we'll discover how the gospel gives me faith for my neighbor. Those immediately in my vicinity, those around me, those I do life with. And then thirdly, we'll discover how the gospel gives me faith for my city, faith for the places I work in, faith for my business and the spaces I find myself in. We see all 3 of those moments in this story, but today we're only focusing on the first moment. This Samaritan woman, a complete outcast in society, totally alone, without friends, obviously broken and busy dealing with a lot of shame and a lot of pain and a lot of guilt simply because of life that's happened. She's made some bad decisions up until this point. Maybe some bad decisions have been made on her behalf that kind of sidetracked her and ruined her life in a sense. But she meets a man named Jesus at a water well, and they strike up a conversation. And it's incredible to see that instead of piling on the shame, instead of contributing or adding to her guilt, instead of condemning her like the rest of society had done up until this point, Jesus has this complete opposite reaction when he meets this woman. When he meets this woman that has a lot of issues. She's in a lot of pain. She has to deal with a lot. She has made horrible decisions and she's stuck in really destructive and unhelpful things. But instead of condemning her, Jesus does the opposite. He actually zooms in on her pain and brokenness. And in one conversation, he opens up her eyes to the reality that the thing she had been longing for, the water in a sense that she's been thirsty for, the real true food in life that she's been hungry for, the real sense of purpose, safety, belonging, and contentment, and all those things so naturally built into us. He is actually that. She's actually been looking for him, and she didn't even know it. In this conversation, Jesus rightly calls himself the true living water that she needs to be eternally satisfied. He rightly calls himself the Messiah that she had been waiting for to come and save her from her sin and set her free and take her on a new path in life. You see, before anything else, God has a desire to make you new first. His agenda is making things new. And the very first priority item on his making new agenda is people. The Samaritan woman, she firstly discovers faith for herself. She meets Jesus personally. Faith that will save her from her sin, faith that will save her from her shame and her brokenness, but also faith that will enable her to turn away from those things towards Jesus and embrace the life that he has for her. My question to you, my friend, is this: have you discovered a personal faith yet? Have you had that moment where the gospel of Jesus and the power that his gospel brings about moved from an out there concept to a right in here concept, where faith became more than head knowledge, but it became heart revelation, where faith moves from hopefully one day things will be okay if and when Jesus comes back, to a real raw reality where I am firm and established and growing in my own faith? Have you had that moment yet in your own life? You see, faith should always be personal first. Before we get to talking about how the gospel gives us faith for my neighbor or faith for my city, faith firstly and foremostly has to be personal in its nature. Did you know this, friend? God desires to use you in his making all things new agenda. That's right. He desires to use you, whether you're a scholar, student, young working adult, family man, house mom, whether you are retired, it doesn't matter. God desires to use you in his agenda of extending his restoration plan of the gospel into all the corners of the earth. Whether that's in your workspace, your family life, that is still up for discussion, but he desires to use you, your gifts, your uniqueness, and yes, even your own brokenness. He desires to use those things so that he can extend his restoration everywhere. And if he can use a Samaritan woman that was a complete outcast, that had no social standing, that had been completely rejected and kind of dismissed as someone that is of zero value, if he can use a woman like that to bring faith to her neighbors and also to bring faith to her city, which happens in this case. If you read the rest of John 4, you'll discover that she goes to her neighbors and she goes to the entire city, and it's written that that entire town comes to salvation. Everyone comes to believe in Jesus simply because of the first moment where faith became a reality to herself. If God can use someone like that, my friend, imagine what he can do with your life if you submit yourself to him. I trust that that will be your reality going forward. If you've enjoyed this content, please make sure you hit that subscribe button for more of the same. Cheers.